Welcome everyone to another episode of the Shaman's Way podcast. As always, this episode comes from the teachings of our amazing friend and shaman in residence, Kriket. We hope you're enjoying these podcasts as much as we enjoy making them, and I'd like to take just a moment to ask you if you would please leave us a rating and a comment in iTunes or whichever podcast player you're listening to us from. Giving us a rating and sharing this podcast with others is the biggest way you can tell us that you like our show. Now, without further ado, on with the episode.
Hail and hello, and welcome back to my constant listener, and welcome to my semi-constant listener, and absolutely welcome to my first-time listeners. Today we're going to talk about personal protection, and it seems to be a topic that is it's talked about a lot, and I get questions asked of me all the time. How do you protect yourself, or what do you use for self-protection? So instead of talking about, why it's important or these sorts of things, let's just talk about some of the things that have been used in history and also through with my own self. I'm not going to talk a lot about history because I do that enough, but I'm going to talk about some of my own uses for protection, self-protection. First of all, I'm not going to talk about being on the body or what I use on the body yet. I'm just going to talk about using methods that seem to be very helpful with respect to the house and your surroundings. And I know that there are quite a few of you who are listening who already have probably a fairly regimented practice for clearing your space, probably have a practice for self-protection, and you may find mine a little bit lax. But that's okay, because we all have to be here in a different way, and we have to work with our spirit in a different way. Of course, the first thing I'm going to say is smudging. So as some of you know and some of you don't, I like to create a lot of my own smudges, or all my own smudges. I love the smell of them. No two are ever the same. There are a myriad of ingredients you can use in smudge in order to get certain effects. When I use a very strong and need a really potent smudge for my house, or if I'm going into someone's house, some of the things that I like to use in it are lavender buds, like little lavender buds. I've never used lavender oil because I've always had availability of buds. The other thing that I use is I use snake skin, because I think that's very important. I use quite a bit of copal or frankincense because I like those particular energies. And if you happen to have neroli, Neroli oil, I also use neroli oil. The reason I use neroli oil is because historically it has been used in the embalming methods, and it has been used as a means or an offering to the other world, to the other side, to the dying. So I will put neroli in mine specifically to add that extra punch or that extra dimension to it. I also like to use red willow fungus, but those are just my own things. Those don't have to be your combination. I do know that there are various smudges that you can purchase either at your local store and most definitely online that are specifically designed for clearing a house or for smudging a house. So you may want to consider those. If you don't have the means or the ingredients to make your own smudge, then that's what I would recommend. I do know that using just straight sage is a very good cleanser, and it seems to push everything out. And I know that some people use sweetgrass. I use sweetgrass as a secondary because I love the smell of sweetgrass, and because to me because of the braids and what the braids represent. For me, I use it more as an inviting in or a welcoming scent or a clearing scent. So in smudging, that's what I particularly like. So what it does is that the smoke captures the negative energies or the particles that are either in our illuminated body, they could be in our space, they could be hard to reach places. So when the smoke disappears, it transports that negative energy particles to be dispersed. And the most popular plants for smudging are the ones that we talked about. And I know that we all have our own ideas as to what this is. Now I'm going to go a little bit more into some of the house clearing, because when you smudge, I want to clean my house. I use a lot of salt. Now I use salt when I also do house clearings as an offering, but I also use salt as a means of helping the house or helping where I am. I think salt has some of the things that salt has been said over the years. That salt is the combination of all four elements. It comes from the water, is dried by the air. You find it on the land, and from that perspective, and it is of the earth. It is solid, so it's of the earth. So it combines all four elements, which would be true if all salt came from water. But there are salt mines, and there are also salt. Anyways, we'll just say salt mines because my word is certainly coming up blank. If we think about it, salt is a natural desiccating agent, meaning it sucks up water. So it's one of the strongest desiccants that we have. This is why slugs die when you put salt on them. It's why salt is used to preserve things. It's why salt kills all the bacteria around it. It's sucking up the water. On the other hand, it also sucks up oil or iron or pretty much anything else. It's a natural oxidizer, which means that it makes things rust or corrode. The other aspect of salt that I find really compelling is that it has the ability to transmit electricity. It's one of the strongest conductors. So this is one of the main uses that the body has for the various salts. So when we put all of these together, what do we have? Well, we have a natural substance that transmits energy easily. It absorbs all types of energy from the environment and can break down most things, metals. So it brings it to a more natural state. Salt is a great way to clean a new tool, to cleanse someone if they've been covered in bad energy from a bad day at work or a bad experience. This is why salt baths are also recommended. One of the other ways that I think that salt is very important is I use it as a means of using salt water. So as we talked about earlier, that it's desiccating, it sucks up water. What I use it for is I use medicine wheels or hand draw medicine wheels. So usually I use full moon water and new moon water, but if you just have natural water, I'm sure that is not going to harm anything at all. If you have water and you take your pendulum, and if your pendulum is swinging in the negative so that you don't have really healthy water, if you put the intention into the water and use your pendulum can actually change the energy of the water and make it from a negative effect for the body to a positive effect for the body, for a negative effect for the room to a positive effect for the room. So I think it's important to remember that we can always change something if we ask the spirits to help us. Not every single time, but in water, most certainly. So I add salt. I like to use sea salt, or I also have access to the Himalayan rock salt. I don't use a lot of Himalayan rock salt because I don't know if it is ethically gathered. I know that sea salt is not always ethically gathered. So I run into ethical issues with respect to using things of the land. But I'm going to stop that philosophical debate and allow you to have that in your own head, in your own time. I mix the salt water and the salt and the moon water, and I take my hand and I draw the medicine wheel on both sides of the doors. So if I'm using my outside of my door, then I take my hand and I draw a circle, and then I cut the circle into quarters, north, south, east, west, or the four elements. If I'm feeling that I particularly need some powerful oomph to it, I will cut the circle into 8 pieces. So we've got the north, south, east, west, northeast, southeast, southwest, and northwest. So we have those aspects covered as well. On the other side of the door, I'm going to do the exact same thing. I also do it on my windows, on the inside of my windows. If you can reach the outside of your windows or take your window off, that's great. Remember, salt does leave a smudge, so you have to be conscious of that. It does not have to cover the whole window, and if you're not comfortable putting it on the window, then what you can do is you can put it over top of something, not plastic, but you can put it on paper, you can put it on a picture, and then you can place that on the window as well. But I personally like to get straight to the element, straight to the mirror. So I do that to each side of all of my doors. I do that to all of my windows. And if you live in an apartment or a duplex or a townhome or a condo where you have a neighboring wall or you have a connector wall, I would also put that basically on the wall that separates myself from my neighbors. Not because I think my neighbors are evil or bad people or anything along those lines, but I don't think that it harms us by any stretch of the imagination to perform some type of psychic cleansiness. And so, whatever goes on in my house, and a lot of things go on in my house, I want to be confident if I shared a wall with a neighbor, which I don't, but if I did, then I would want, when the places that I have, because I've lived in townhouses and duplexes and all sorts of things, then I have most certainly drawn them on the wall and also on the floor under a carpet when I've been on the top floor in a duplex and somebody is on the bottom floor in a fourplex. So there is also that aspect to it as well. I have also drawn the medicine wheel, the entire medicine wheel, on the floor underneath a carpet in a paint that can dissolve when I move or if I need to wash it or if I need to change it. So that's also one other thing that I do. So that is a part of cleansing the house and using salt. The other aspect that I also like to use is I also like to use corn. And corn has so many different aspects to it. So when I go into a house and I do a house clearing, what I often leave, now this is going to be a departure from what I said about salt, but this is another aspect of salt. Not so much here in Alberta or in Western Canada. I don't find a lot of references in the oral stories that have been written down or the oral traditions that I've been able to read. With respect to the First Nations people in this part of Canada, it doesn't seem that they used salt necessarily for preserving their food. It seems that they used more likely rendered fat. That's relevant to here, but not relevant to our discussion. The preservation of salt, and salt being such a highly sought commodity for your ancestors, and for our ancestors, many of them traded in salt. It became an absolute currency. So when I clean someone's house, I will often leave a small bowl, and one half of the side is filled with sea salt, and the other half is filled with corn. So the salt is an honoring to the ancestors that are living in the house or the ancestors that have come with the people who own the house. It's an honoring saying, I understand how valuable you are and allow me to use something and offer to you that would have been valuable to you or you recognize as value or you recognize as scarce. So that's the what my spirits have suggested to me that I use. The other use of corn, I think, is that corn, she's such an amazing being. So I think that from the perspective of corn, we cultivate, we pray with it, we eat it. For many native farmers of the Americas, the ear of corn, it's a living being, even a mother. We think about the cob, it's covered with kernels of life that give forth generations. It can not grow to maturity outside the body of the earth, so therefore corn is a part of the earth, nor can it grow without the sun, moisture, and human care. Embedded, therefore, in corn's very nature is earth, sun, wind, rain, and care of the human being. It nourishes the people who tend to her. Without her nourishment, there is not the physical energy to cultivate her. We have many different cultures in the Americas that have relied on corn as their sustenance and a very important part of their or aspects of their life. And it's something that they depended on. So she's also connected to and dependent on all that which sustains her. Corn is not only offered to people who are hungry, but also to the gods and the ancestors, because corn for me is a nourisher of all life, past, present, and future. It is called beautiful by many because all aspects of corn feed life. Her fertilizing pollen is used to heal. Her sheath or her husk is used. One of the things that I've used it for over the years is to carry tobacco. It can also be used to roll tobacco and to be smoked in ceremony. The stalk is burned in the springtime in some of the traditions that I've read, and they till the ashes to restore the earth. Corn in and of itself cannot be in isolation. She's a part of the continuum of life, whose unique expression is part of an interactive, let's face it, it's part of the web of identities and events, and it all gives rise to the place of honor that corn rests within my world. Corn is sun, rain, night, and day, earth, wind, human, and ancestor. The corn, for some people, especially for some of the Mayan prophecies, they say that the corn mother descended into the underworld and brought the human race into the world. So corn has many different relationships. It's also, from that perspective of food, I'm offering the spirits something to eat. So I am honoring the spirits who have come, who are leaving in a house clearing. So we leave them food so they can take it on their way. We give room in house clearings to the spiritus domini, or the house spirit that lives there. So we give nourishment and sustenance to that spirit. I leave a can, and that I ask the people whose houses I clear to leave that for 3 days, because for me, 3 is a blessing. 3 is a magical number. So it makes sense in my world that I would use 3 days. And then I ask them to offer it to a tree that they are particularly comfortable with. So give that back. So that's one of the things. So we have smudge, we have corn, we have salt. I also will salt my car door if I'm going to someone's house, and I think that it's a fairly active house, or I might not necessarily be in good company. I will salt my door of my car before I get out, and my simple prayer is only let me enter and only let me pass. If I am particularly on high alert, then I will also salt if they have a fence or the beginning of a yard, I'll salt that. And then I will often salt, as a part of my clearing, the outside of the door as well. What I've noticed over the years of using salt lines is that whatever is stuck to the person, this has been my understanding. This may not work for you. This may not be your version of reality, but it's my version of reality, is that when I use that, I feel that whatever is attached to the person coming into my house isn't allowed to cross that particular barrier of salt, because for me it has become sacred. I prayed over it. It has been in my house. It has, there are many different aspects to it, so there's a lead up to it. I have seen people trip coming into my doorways and into my ceremonies. Not a whole lot, like I wouldn't say it's 100 times in my lifetime, but often enough for me to see that the pattern certainly exists. And often they'll look behind them, or they'll look at their feet and wonder what they tripped over. But for me, I know that whatever's attached to them has tripped and is stuck behind the salt. And the person leaving, that being or that attachment or whatever, may or may not be attached or reattach itself when they walk out the door. Just as an example. The other thing that I think is very important is I think it's important to use amulets. I think amulets are underrated in this community, or in this culture, perhaps in modern, maybe in neo-shamanism, certainly not by my ancestors or your ancestors. But I find them really very useful because I feel very protected. I have We also have fetishes. And there are different cultures which use fetishes. Fetishes are used in my culture. I have a fetish that is incredibly invaluable to me. That was given to me many years ago, and it is the carving of one of the spirit kin that has protected me for a long period of time. And no, it's not a lion. But I can't allow anybody to touch it. I wouldn't allow anybody to wear it or do those sorts of things with it. I also have a necklace that is absolutely beautiful, and it's hand beaded and it's gorgeous. I would love to show it off as a piece of jewelry, but it's not a jewelry, it's my heart protection. So I put it on and I tuck it under my shirt. Fortunately, I wear a bra, so I stick it into my bra so that it doesn't move. And I have other necklaces that I use for amulets that are specifically for that particular reason. They are magical, they help protect me. As a side note, one of the things I heard over the years is that if you are wearing a piece of jewelry, especially in my case, when it's happened each time, it's happened when I've been wearing a solid string of beads. And the beads have just shattered and broken. And what I understand from people who are more sensitive to the energies of stone is that that stone has taken a particular hit for you, and that you have been bypassed by the whatever negativity was coming your way. So there is that part of it. The other protection for the human body that I find important is if you have a connection to the ruins, the Nordic ruins, then there are symbols in there that are specifically for protection that I have drawn onto my body when I've gone into certain situations. And I have certainly felt more protected and more at ease using those. So we have amulets, we have drawing on the skin. Other people I know, they will talk about using the white bubble or the white light. I don't use that because it's not my language, and I don't, I'm not a light worker, so I don't really work with light in that way. However, the Kriket twist, the shamanic twist, is if I feel that I need a protection around me when I'm going somewhere. I have journeyed in the past to find out what my spirits are that are my body protectors or my guardians. So one of them is a relatively large snake, and the coils of the snake start at my feet and are wound around my body until I'm completely covered, and the head of the snake is above my head. Interestingly enough, when I wrap myself in the body of the snake, or allow the snake to wrap itself around me, I guess should be the words I'm using, what I find is that people do move. I have seen people trip over the snake's tail. I have seen people jump out of my way. And I've also had one person turn around, look at me, and scream in a light way, not like a horrifying, scream, but it made me laugh internally so hard. You have no idea. Or if you do know me, you probably do know how I have an idea of how hard I laughed. So that's my form of protection. I know that what I've done over the time, especially if I'm traveling, I take a small rattle with me. And before I head out the door, I like to spend 3 to 5 minutes, so not a long period of time. And I use my rattle to call in my authentic self, call in my protector spirits, and settle and ease my mind for the day, especially if I know I'm going into a contentious situation. If I know I'm going into a meeting that is going to be particularly contentious, or I know that I have people who are coming to see me who have spirits that are not going to be very kind or very gracious with me. I know that that's an opportunity, or that's a time when I will engage that extra layer of protection for myself. Another thing that I also like to do with respect to protection is I always have a friend in the car. So there are people who hang various things in their car. I have two very specific, uh, you know, stuffed animals, for lack of a better word. I know that sounds kind of dorky, but stuff in my car that helps to, I think, protect me from various things. Whether or not it actually does is anybody's guess, but I'm willing to believe that it does. I also like to be very hyper aware or be quite aware of what is going on around me. I think that part of that has been working with predator spirit kin for so long that I have been well trained, so to speak, to continually be on the lookout for who is around, what are the energies, what are not the energies. However, I think it's very important to point out to you that as many of the protection measures as I talk about, one thing before I go off into my little tangent is in order to protect my wrists, especially if I've been doing very intense work, is I will wear bracelets made of stone. So I have one bracelet that is made of chrysocolla and another bracelet that is made of smoky quartz. And the reason I wear bracelets on my hands or on my wrists when I do extraction work is that oftentimes what I find is that my wrists, my fingers, or my body feels like it's getting bit, could be pinched, but I get odd ouches. And I have chalked it up to when I'm doing the work, whatever is being pulled off the body, whatever is being pulled out of the body has an essence to it that doesn't want to be moved, and so bites me. I also find that I get more itchy when I do healing work than when I don't do healing work. And for myself, my spirits have told me that I am not to use my bare fingers to scratch because I'm opening my aura or my body to allow some of that negativity to come into my protective space, into my protective body. So what I will generally do is if I can't ignore it, which is usually the best operation, if I can't ignore it, then I will take my shirt or my coat or something and I'll put my finger underneath it and scratch then. It's interesting that when you're doing healing work, that's when you have the most itch, which I mean could be mind over matter, it could be psychosomatic. Oh my God, my hands are busy, therefore I cannot scratch. And the body goes, oh, look, we're not defended, so therefore, oh my God, I'm going to make a scratch, Like, who knows? I don't know. Sometimes I think we have gremlins in our body. Like, what the hell? Why wouldn't we, right? But where I want to go with this, or how I want to end off with this, is that I think it's invaluable to set up protections. I think it's invaluable to realize that we are vulnerable in this world. I think it is important to recognize that we have a way of cleaning things and we have a way of creating barriers between us and that, or between that and us, whatever the thing is. But it's important also to recognize that you have a lot of your own personal strength and you have been working with this for a long period of time. And as a result of working with this for a long period of time, I think that I have a fairly consistent kick-ass team that certainly does not allow me to get into a lot of sticky situations. That being said, I certainly have had my share of sticky situations, but considering the number of situations I put myself into and how many have become sticky, I think the odds are in my favor. I think it is invaluable for you to keep in mind that you are a progenitor, you are the creator for the energy that broils from inside of you. Now, I'm not talking from a psychological perspective. I'm not talking from shadow. I'm not talking from the saboteur or from the sorcerer. I'm not talking about any aspect of that, period. What I am talking about is just having that knowledge that you do have the ability to generate your own energy and generate your own form of protection. One of the ways for me to connect with the energy inside my body and move the energy around my body is through breath work. So if I really want to move my body into a place of feeling safe or protected, then I bring my awareness fully into my body. And the easiest way that I can think of to bring awareness into self or into body is through breath. The only place you can be when you are breathing is present. I also have a good relationship with my spirits. I have the tattoos on my back. The reason I have tattoos on my back, for me, this is my reality, again, doesn't have to be yours, is that they are my protective beings. And I have noticed, and I believe I have talked about this on a couple of podcasts, when I am in a sticky situation that I'm unaware is a sticky situation, what will happen for me is that my back will get very warm where my tattoos reside, especially the one in the center of my back. It can get prickly hot. And if I open my awareness, both from a physical perspective as well as from a spiritual perspective, I'm able to look around me and I'm able to recognize what is or could be a potential threat, whether it be physical, etherical, whatever the matter of that is. I think it is important to have and maintain relationship with spirit. I'm not certain. I have many friends who practice a Wicca path and others who practice a witch's path. They are, from my perspective, I'm not saying they as a separate being, but the teachings that I've gleaned over the years from hanging out with my friends is that there are protection charms, there are protection spells, and it's important to do protection. And yet, when I move in my shamanic world with my shamanic practitioners and my shamanic friends, it's not really something that is specifically talked about. When I do work with my Finnish ancestors and when I do work with my own traditions, there are many aspects of the ceremonial garb that are specifically for protection. The mirrors is one, not being able to see the face is the other, the metal on the body, the metal on the legs. These are all parts of the ceremonial garb that is designed specifically to deflect and reflect spirit off of you and spirit away from you. Because when you're in a ritual space, when you're in a ritual trance, you are, although protected, you're far more open because you're far more expansive. So in those situations, from a traditional perspective, we would wear quite a bit of ritual gear. One of the things I use quite a bit if I don't have garb with me is I use a scarf, and that scarf is that part of my protection. Protects my back, protects my shoulders, protects my heart. For me, the heart is probably the most vulnerable. So, the fourth chakra, the third chakra, those are my two most vulnerable. By relying on my spirits to work with me, to love me, to protect me, I'm enabling myself to have a relationship of trust and a relationship that is built upon acknowledgement of relationship. It's built upon years of reliance upon one another, although I'm sure I rely on them more than they rely on me. But I'm not always sure about that either, because some of the work that gets done in this world could not happen if I didn't use my mind, my ears, my hands, my voice, and my eyes on behalf of spirit. So it is a relationship, and it's certainly not a one-sided relationship, hence the word relationship. I think that for each individual using self-protection, there are also prayers. There are prayers of protection. There are certain spirits that people work with in order to feel protected, in order to have protection. in order to call upon this goddess or that god or this deity or that deity to protect me in this time and in this space as I do this holy sacred work. There certainly are those types of prayers for self-protection. So we have, how do you protect the perimeter of the house? We talked about the salt. We talked about the sage and smudge. Drumming and rattling in your house is a great way to clear it, a great way to cleanse it, and a great way to protect it. One of the other things that I have used, and I know I've talked about before, is the use of holy soil. And holy or blessed soil, you might think is a bit of an oxymoron right now, comes from graveyards, and it isn't. And so let's look at it from this perspective. Instead of freaking out that I have dead people's soil in my house, this is consecrated soil. This is holy soil. The churches and the temples and the graveyards that are associated with them are all very sacred ground. It's prayed over almost on a daily basis. They have funerals. It's cried in, the sacred salt and the sacred conductor of physiology and energy and sorrow and emotions has been fallen upon the earth, thousands and thousands and thousands of tears. So if I want a very strong protection around the house, not only will I use that kick-ass smudge that I talked about at the very beginning, but I will also use the sacred soil to either put it around the house. There are times I put it in the smudge, but to put it around the house on the perimeter of the house, not necessarily on the inside of the house. However, there's absolutely nothing that would prevent you from using it on the inside of the house. So I like to use the holy sacred soil. So we've gone through the house. We've talked about leaving offerings. So I've talked about the importance to me of salt and the importance to me of cornmeal. I've talked about drawing symbols upon the body. I've talked about journeying to find the guardians for the physical body and calling those guardians in. I've talked about breath work and coming into place and using our awareness. We've talked about utilizing the spirits who are around you and forming a relationship and knowing that you can rely on them. And I know I've covered a couple of other things that I haven't talked about or I haven't referenced in this particular moment. What I think I've given you are some ideas that you probably already have, perhaps a little bit of information you didn't have, and perhaps I'm introducing to you a topic that you really weren't aware of. So if you do practice the Wicca and the witch traditions and mix in shamanism, and I think there are certain protections within the Druid as well, among other traditions, obviously, and there are many different traditions. So I think you can mix and match in your world. I think that is the joy of neo-shamanism or neo-paganism, is that we are not specifically stuck to one thing or to another thing. If you are invested in a particular culture, find out what ceremonies are used in that particular culture or that particular tradition that specifically speaks about protection. How do you protect yourself? How do you not protect yourself? So those are some of my thoughts. Those are some of my ideas. I do thank you for listening. I do thank you for sharing your incredibly special and sacred time with me. I thank you to my constant listeners for your beautiful ears, for your beautiful time. To my semi-constant listeners, thank you for tuning in. And to my brand new listeners, I hope you stuck with me to the very end. If you did, you're obviously hearing this. I am open to suggestions. I don't have very many left on the forefront from you lovely listeners. So if any of you have an idea, please send it along. Until next time.
Thank you again for joining us here on the Shaman's Way podcast. If you have any questions, would like to make a request for a future episode, or if you're looking for other shamanic resources, including free drumming tracks, please visit us at shamansway.net. Until the next episode, be well, everyone.